Good morning, Stacey.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Ooh, I'm doing very well, especially with the fire on and keeping nice and warm.
Yeah, my fire's not on, which was a schoolboy error this morning, but never mind. I'll sort that out later. Stacey, tell us a little bit about you. Give us a little introduction to you and what you do at Nimble.
Okay, so my name's Stacey. I've been with Nimble for coming up to a year and a half now. So I'm a lead consultant. Some of my skills, with a lot of my skills, actually sit within like the sort of the agile coaching forum, but also around agile delivery, commercials, customer engagement, stakeholder management. So I work with clients on helping them find the best way to deliver their products to market. And I work with our teams, or I can work solo with a business to help them understand what they need to do.
Awesome. Really cool. Tell us, let's roll it back a little bit. How did you first get started in tech and digital?
Oh, mine's a little bit of a squiggly line. So I actually have a degree in forensic science, which I acquired at Lincoln University. And I was always really passionate about reflecting and using data to understand how something could be better, which is really, really useful sort of like in the forensic market to make sure that we're hitting criteria. So I was a DNA specialist for about 6.5 years. And then while we were there, we had a platform that we would need to change to upload the DNA to the national DNA database.
Right.
Situations would change, requirements would change for the national DNA database. We had one lone developer that would go into this software, change it, off you run, and something over here would break, something over here. So I kind of got quite frustrated with this, and having issues like this is not great. So I said, well, hang on a minute, can you just like make a copy of what you've got and I'll check it first? I started doing that. So I kind of created my own test role, not knowing that testing was a thing. And I really enjoyed it, but there wasn't an appetite for it within that sector. So I actually Googled paid to test things.
Right.
And it came up that testing was a job. So I was like, amazing. So luckily a scientific company, so I kind of kept on the scientific route, took me on as a manual tester, which was amazing. And then they decided to employ agile techniques and a Scrum safe framework. Me being a tester, and this is way, way back when, this is like 10 years ago now, when we were put into sprints, testing was done at the end. We know it's not, we know it shouldn't be, but testing was done at the end. So I had nothing to do for 8 days of the 10-day sprint. So it made sense that I had the opportunity to make sure that things were flowing and that conversations were happening and things like that. So started to be a Scrum Master, created a cohort. We had sites across the world. So in total, we had about 12 to 14 Scrum Masters. So I'd get those together in a guild. We'd have conversations. We'd share. We'd upskill each other. And then I moved to Booking.com as an agile coach for around 5 years, which was great to sort of go to that next level, to be integrated with a wider business, to see different problems, to work with different teams in different ways. And it sort of like led me into this sort of consultant view that where you weren't there 100% of the time, but you needed to be able to be on your game. You needed to be able to assess. You needed to be able to pick up patterns and to be able to do your job. And then I moved to Nimble.
Nice. Now, so that a long journey condensed into a minute or so, which is cool.
I can, years there.
Yeah, it's fine. When you're on that journey and you're building your career, did you ever have a role model that you thought, yeah, I want to be like person X or person Y? Was there someone who stood out to you in your career, maybe one or two people, or was it?
I had a number of people, and I wouldn't really say it was that I wanted to be like them, but I wanted to harness their energy and their drive for improvement and learning, and also how they affected other people in a positive manner. So, I mean, even now to this day, I still say, if I can just help one person's day be that bit better, whether it be professionally within work or at home, because I use the same methodologies at home as well around like learning and reflection, because it's just ingrained in me now. The role model that I had in Waters, she became actually more of a mentor to me, which was great because when I was in situations, she would have the most amazing coaching questions that would make me stop and think, and it would make me also learn. And she challenged me so much. And sometimes I can get a bit defensive when someone goes, well, hang on a minute, what about this? And I'm like, no, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it for years. But it was amazing to be in that moment, to just pause and go, every day is a school day if we're not learning
Yeah.
what we're doing. And she imparted that behavior on me, which hopefully I carry through with other people, or at least I try to. And then moving to booking.com, I had a similar character who worked with me on that wider scope, but also as well, she really helped me with my mental health and being comfortable with who I am, which I can never thank her for. And I still speak to both of them to this day.
That's awesome. No, that's really cool, because the hidden stuff is just as important as the stuff we see every day, right? So for sure, that's brilliant to hear. Obviously, we're here talking about diversity and inclusivity. Is that just the reason why we're doing things like this? So let's talk about the challenges you face then, because as a woman in tech, you've obviously we've talked about this, so I know you've faced challenges in your career. Tell us a little bit about those. Tell us a little bit about the challenges you faced building your very successful career, and what sort of barriers you had to knock down coming through.
So one of the biggest ones, which I really wasn't aware of for a while actually, is when I moved from the forensic sector into technology. I was younger. The predominant sort of demographic were men, and that's not to say that, that there's an issue with that. That's just the way the world was, and we're making great steps to try and sort of diversify that. But being a young blonde female, because then the blonde was wrapped over the top of it as well, trying to be taken seriously was very, very difficult, especially in that forum. It was there, you can't be that clever, you're blonde. Those really old school ways of thinking. And it did knock my confidence quite a bit, to the point that I would question everything. It led me down the routes of like imposter syndrome of, well, if they're saying it, it must be true. Even if they were just like comment, I'm quite a jerky person. Even if they were just sort of like little slide digs and comments and jokes, I would come home and be like, oh my God, is that what people really think of me? They think that I'm not good at my job because of how I look, or my age, or the fact that I'm a woman. Like it really confused me, and it opened my eyes to behaviors in that space. And then I started looking at how the successful women, and I was new, so I was sort of fairly sort of like low down, but the women that were further up in hierarchy, what were they doing differently? And I was watching their behaviors, and I actually found that they were mimicking the aggression of men, which made me really sad, because when you spoke to them about their home life and their families, that was not their persona and their character. And it's almost like they had to put this mask on. And this is why I talk about these things, because anybody, regardless, should never feel that they have to be somebody else to be successful. So that was a bit of a struggle, and it's something that even now it sits with me when I challenge things and question things. I'm like, oh my God, but what if?
Got it. Okay. Interesting. And then sort of, obviously that you've shared with us some of the challenges coming through your career. In terms of if we get up to speed to today, and the and I say today, but the last, say, year or two, and your recent roles and stuff, are there still challenges that you go through yourself, or that you see others going through on a regular basis?
I think there'll always be challenges, because they're subjective to the person that is in that situation. I do, in terms of that, if I'm, I went to a hotel recently in London, and I sat down for breakfast, and there was the central section, and then there was sort of almost like a little veranda that was kind of covered around the outside. All right. And I walked into breakfast, and I sat down and I looked, and everyone who was a minority was sat on the outside. And if there was big groups of, whether it be with men or women, they were sort of sat together in the central space. And it made me sort of very aware that this is still an issue nowadays. It was very bravado, very loud, very potentially intimidating to people that are maybe like myself. I went and sat myself to the side, and I was like, hang on a minute. The next day, I'm sitting in the middle, because it's breakfast. Lighting is better there. It's closer to the table. So I still see these things, and I still challenge and question them. But it just made me think where there was people maybe sat around the side that didn't have a lot of confidence, or have always felt that maybe that they're not part of like mainstream, or they can't succeed because they're not part of the bigger group. Are they aware that that is maybe something that is affecting them.
Yeah,
Going on. But I do catch myself checking situations. Like if I'm in a meeting room, I have a little scan of the demographic and I sit there and think, right, especially if it's a Nimble meeting, where we can control what's moving around, what do we need to focus on? What is missing here? Because with everybody's differences in sort of culture, upbringing, ethnicity, brings different journeys, brings different perspectives, which adds to a massive pot of opportunities and learning and different ways to tackle problems. And surely an enrichment of a situation that gives you options, like I say, to tackle problems or go after something is much better than single points of view, which aren't really the way the world is nowadays.
Yeah, you mentioned our company, Nimble, obviously there. How do you think we're doing in terms of sort of making Nimble an inclusive place where people can be their true selves at work? How do you think we're doing?
If we weren't doing it, I wouldn't be here because it's massively important to me. There's always improvements, and there's things as well that are outside of our control, but we are conscious of this because some of the changes in terms of ethnic inclusion and diversity in terms of who we employ, some of this stuff is from grassroots. We have to change the mindsets of children, of schools, of parents, and this takes time. But within Nimble, this is something as well that we're actually trying to sort of capture and influence. But we are very conscious about what we do, even the way that we sort of like interview to make sure that everybody can be included. If somebody, if it's a written task and somebody maybe has dyslexia, how can we ensure that we support that situation and that moment they're going through to make them feel and be included? Because in the end of it all, everyone has an amazing brain and everybody is good at what drives them. So how do we help support people do that? But yeah, if we weren't doing it, I wouldn't be here.
Well, I mean, that's great, but obviously we can always do stuff better. If you could pick, say, one or two things that Nimble could do better in this field, what would you want us to do more of or less of to make it better?
I think going out into underprivileged areas where there is maybe underrepresentation of companies that are willing to support, whether it be through an academy, whether it be through sort of even just touch points, to help situations like for people to move into the industry. I think that's something that we could definitely do and support. And I know there's sort of murmurings around, going ahead and doing things like that, which would be absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so looking at those other things like socioeconomic backgrounds and things like that to really drive more opportunities, equal opportunities further sort of down into the more experience.
If you think of the technology career fairs, they tend to maybe be city-based. They tend to be have a cost incurred to be able to get there. Somebody might not be able to afford that. They might not even know that it is going on because of the environment and the world that they're in. It's not showcasing those opportunities. So how do we ensure that those opportunities are visible for all, and where people need support, like how do we support them, or how do we make it accessible for people to do that? Money sometimes is a factor. If you've got to travel into a big city that's 3.5 hours away and your train ticket's £100, well, maybe you can't afford that. So how do we as Nimble support that or ensure that people feel included? There's also the aspect as well, like I grew up in a village farm town. I don't like cities. I just don't. And I can imagine a younger person coming up, going into a city, maybe really overwhelming. So how do we ensure that we can reach people that don't enjoy those environments? And technology being online as well now has helped massively. But then, how do we keep that going? How do we drive that change?
Yeah. And how important do you think role models are? Because we're talking about, and this is something that I've seen in previous places where we can talk about equal opportunities and we can talk about running initiatives, but I'm a big believer that role models are super important. What do you think about role models in terms of sort of representation in the workforce?
Yeah, I think role models are important if they're used the right way. I think so much when we've been growing up, a role model is somebody to mimic.
Yeah.
And then when you realise that you're a different person or a different character, or you tackle things a different way, or you've maybe found a better way, sometimes you feel like you've failed in living up to that role model's expectations. I think if we view role models more as coaches, that would be better, especially if you've got an opportunity to interact with them, like see how they interact, see how they talk to people. But if somebody's choosing you as a role model, I think there's a responsibility to ensure that they're not trying to mimic you, that you drill down into values and learnings, and that you create an environment of questioning, rather than, well, this is how I did it and it was successful for me. And I'm like, well, I'm not you.
Yeah. It's a really good point, actually, isn't it? Because it's very easy if you're a role model just to say what you did.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, it's like if you look, you might have a goldfish that role model is a shark. Well, he's never going to have big teeth. He's never going to swim that fast. But
you want to give him the opportunity, though.
But the shark can turn around and help them elevate what they've already got. Let's do a bit of training. Let's get that tail going. Let's swim a bit faster. But it's not about mimicking. It's about supporting. So I think role model and coaching, as long as they're viewed right, they can be really powerful.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool. So, I mean, looking back, then you've obviously you made the switch into technology. You've had a successful career in technology, and you continue to sort of grow and learn and progress your own career. I guess looking back, classic question, but if you could go back to Stacey, however many years ago, much earlier in your career, and give some advice or some feedback or some words of encouragement, what would you, or redirection, what would you do to your younger self?
I'd probably say the statement, "This too shall pass." And it will help in so many situations, whether you're feeling imposter syndrome or the odd one out or the only one in a situation. This too shall pass. You will learn, you'll become comfortable, and you'll move forward. Same with if you're on the highs and you're doing really, really well and you're smashing it, and then you may become complacent. This too shall pass. So I think just to sort of hold on to that, to not drill myself down into holes and lose my confidence, and start believing what everybody else thought was more important. Like, I think onto that statement, this too shall pass, whether it's a positive or negative. I think I would love to have known that earlier.
No, that's really cool. Thanks for that. Is there anything else, just as we sort of wrap up this conversation? We've touched on quite a few different things. Anything else you wanted to mention about your own journey, or anything you wanted to say about anyone who's, maybe would watch this and go, I want to be like Stacey, who can identify close enough with you and go, I want to have a successful career like Stacey's had. Anything else you wanted to say or cover?
I think it would just be to always be open. Nothing is set in stone. Self-awareness and reflection, whether professionally or personally, will be the thing that drives you forward.
Nice. I like it. Thanks, Stacey. That's really cool. And thank you for sharing with me and anyone who watches this, all of the information that you've shared today. I think these things can often get quite emotive and things like that. And, we're doing this because we want to share these stories. We want to educate people, and we want to get that representation out there. And that, but we can't do that without people like you stepping up and being open and honest. So from me, to you, thanks for spending this little bit of time and getting involved in this. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all that you do at Nimble as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good chatting.
Thanks, Stacey. Cheers. Thank you.